The earliest megalithic monuments in Europe appeared around 7,000 years ago in France, although there's a strong possibility that some structures on the Atlantic coast may be even older. On the Iberian Peninsula, the Dolmen of Menga is a remarkable example of this megalith building trend. A new paper published in the journal Science Advances details research into the engineering behind this enormous monument. Using geoarchaeology, a team of researchers have analysed just how the ancients were able to build the Dolmen of Menga in Antequera. The megalithic building phenomenon was widespread in Europe during the late Neolithic and early Bronze Age. For several millennia, different cultures built megalithic monuments of varying styles and sizes, many of which still stand today. Whether these cultures were connected isn't known, but it does appear as though these construction techniques spread from east to west, just as agriculture did during the Neolithic Revolution. The purpose of some of these megalithic monuments is quite clear. They were funerary structures, and we can surmise that their grandness and permanence were associated with the belief in the afterlife and ancestor worship over the generations. However, there are also structures where the role they played in society isn't entirely clear, but it was probably connected to some sort of ceremonies or rituals. Regardless of why the ancients built megalithic monuments, the fact is they did it, and they did it well. These ancient groups must have had some sort of social cohesion and plenty of resources to have the free time and organizational capability for such projects. That said, not a great deal of work has been done to understand the logistics and engineering complexities that went into these endeavors. This is the reason why a group of researchers decided to carry out an analysis on the Dolmen of Menga in Spain. In their study, they did a geoarchaeological analysis of the angles of the planes of each stone in the dolmen. They looked at the stratigraphic polarity of each structural element, and they determined the depth of the foundations to understand how the monument was built and why certain decisions in its design seem to have been taken. The Menga Dolmen is part of a UNESCO World Heritage Site that includes 2 natural land formations and 2 other megalithic monuments, which are the Dolmen of Viera and the Tholos of El Romeral. Both dolmens date to the Neolithic, whereas the Tholos dates to the Bronze Age. A few years ago, another Neolithic megalithic tomb, Piedras Blancas, was discovered in the area and eventually excavated. The Menga Dolmen sits on a hill around 50 meters above the surrounding fertile plain and comprises a megalithic structure covered with a tumulus. In 2023, a paper was published in the journal Quaternary Research that detailed several years of work that had been carried out to determine a date for the construction of the Dolmen of Menga. Prior to that, only estimated dates had been calculated. The researchers obtained 29 new dates using radiocarbon testing, optically stimulated luminescence, and uranium-thorium series dating. Radiocarbon testing was carried out on charred remains and animal bone, which included samples from the lower part of the tumulus, which is made up of soil, flint, pottery, and organic material. The upper part of the tumulus is made up of medium-sized stone slabs and clay. Dating was also carried out on the nearby El Toro cave. The researchers found that the Dolmen of Menga was built between 3800 and 3600 BCE and is the oldest of the 4 megalithic monuments in the area. Since the lower part of the mound was built using materials from the natural hill that existed there prior to the monument's construction, earlier dates from these organic remains show that the hill had been occupied beforehand and that activity on it had been intensive. The nearby El Toro cave was inhabited from the 6th millennium through the 5th millennium BCE, before being abandoned when a roof slab fell, possibly due to an earthquake, although that's not been determined with any certainty. This cave had served as a domestic dwelling, an animal pen, and quite possibly a ritual site. So construction of the Menga Dolmen took place against the backdrop of other cultural changes in the area. It coincided with the abandonment of the El Toro cave, an intensification of activity in the Matacabras rock art sanctuary, which the Menga Dolmen is oriented towards, and after the construction of a proto-megalithic grave, Arroyo Saladillo, to the west. The orientation of the Menga Dolmen is interesting because other Iberian megaliths are almost always oriented towards sunrise between the winter and summer solstices, rather than a natural formation on land. The Dolmen of Menga is a gallery dolmen measuring 24.9 meters in length. Its height rises from 2.5 meters at the entrance to 3.45 meters at the back of the chamber. There are 12 uprights on either side, a huge slab at the back, and 5 large capstones. In the center of the chamber, 3 stone pillars are situated along its longitudinal axis. The structure is covered by a mound measuring 48.3 meters on its northeast to southwest axis and 44 meters on its northwest to southeast axis. This tumulus has protected the monument for more than 6,000 years and would have provided it with additional stability at the time of construction. Unusually for a megalithic monument, in the back of the Dolmen of Menga there is a water well which runs to a depth of 19.4 meters and has a width of 1.5 meters. Capstone C5 weighs approximately 150 tons, which makes it the largest megalithic stone to have been moved in Iberia and the second largest one in Europe. All of the rocks used to build the dolmen are of upper Tortonian age and are soft to moderately soft. Trace fossils can be seen in these rocks. The dolmen is oriented northeast towards the natural mountain formation known as La Peña de los Enamorados, which is where the Matacabras rock art shelter is located. Although not oriented towards the summer solstice, on that date the left side of the dolmen's chamber is dark whilst the right side is illuminated. This may have been intentional. The researchers analysed the stratigraphic polarity of the uprights, capstones and pillars. This means they looked at the trace fossils which show the direction of the paleostream in which the original sedimentation that formed the rocks had occurred. From this, they were able to determine the stratification of the rocks in the quarries that provided the material. This analysis led to the conclusion that the ancient builders placed the side of the uprights that had formed the floor of the original stratum facing inwards, whilst the sides that formed the roof face outwards. Inside the monument, the uprights tilt slightly inwards at an angle of 85.2 degrees on the left side and 84 degrees on the right side. This gives the interior a trapezoidal shape. The orthostats also lean sideways against each other. To calculate the depth of the foundation, plans, photographs and renderings going back as far as the first excavations in the 1840s were analysed along with more recent research. Each upright had been placed in a socket, and the team found that these foundation ditches formed a stepped terrace which descended towards the entrance. The stones that make up the Dolmen of Menga were quarried from an area called Cerro de la Cruz, 850 meters away and at an elevation of 50 meters higher than the monument. This meant that the ancient builders could use the descent to make the transportation of the stones easier, although it would still have been difficult to control acceleration and to create a trackway and method of transportation that would minimize friction. Since the rocks are soft or moderately soft, it would also have been hard to move them without causing damage. The authors of the paper suggest that sledges would have been the most likely transportation method used. Since deep foundation sockets were created, which then meant 1/3 of each upright was underground, it's likely that counterweights were used to place them. The researchers were also able to determine that the uprights on the left-hand side of the monument were placed one after the other, starting with the one nearest the back. However, the uprights on the right-hand side were placed one after the other, starting from the front and leading to the back. The pillars were then erected before the capstones were laid. Finally, the tumulus was built. Since cuts must have been made in the uprights in order for them to lean inwards and against each other, these would have been done before they were placed. Similar features have been seen at other megalithic monuments in Europe. The authors suggest that a combination of trackways and sledges were used to transport the stones without damaging them, and that ramps and counterweights were used to put them in position. Whether the ancient engineers realized it or not, the way they built the tumulus ensured stability in a seismic region. The interlocking of the uprights in the way they leaned inwards and against each other also contributed to the overall stability of the monument. In conclusion, the authors of the paper suggest that the builders of the Dolmen of Menga had advanced knowledge in geology, physics, geometry, and astronomy. Interestingly, no simpler predecessors of this monument have been found in the area, which would show a gradual development of the skills required to build it. On the contrary, it seems that the ancient engineers of the Dolmen of Menga were technologically innovative. However, there are many older megalithic monuments, even if they are not quite as impressive, so it's possible that knowledge was exchanged and accumulated with other groups in Europe. The Antequera region was full of abiotic resources in the Neolithic, which the researchers think may have attracted people to the area. During the preparation of this video, I also read a paper called Waterscapes Through Time, the Menga Well as a Unique Hydraulic Resource in its Geographic and Historical Context. It's generally accepted that the dolmen was a burial tomb originally. Some bones and grave goods were found during initial excavations. This brings up the obvious question of why there is a well in it. The paper, published in the journal Human-Made Environments in 2021, analysed the infill excavated from the well and elements of its structure and came to the conclusion that it was not dug at the same time the Menga Dolmen was built. However, since certain parts of it are not terribly practical, they also think that when it was dug, it was used for ritual purposes. Sacred water wells were a feature of many ancient societies, as well as being common in more modern times, and the Antequera area also has a lot of associations between water and sacred practices. I'm not entirely convinced by this, but it's an interesting idea. That's it. Thank you to my patrons and channel members. Don't forget to hit the like button if you didn't already, and I'll see you next time.